Welcome back, folks. I hope you just finished listening to my fascinating reading of this week's Torah portion. It is Beha'alotcha. It is Numbers 8:1 through 12:16, and it means when you set up. It's interesting. This is we have some revolution in the ranks in this week's Torah portion here in chapter 12. So, Miriam and Aaron, they spake against Moses because of, apparently he married another woman, like as an Ethiopian woman. Yeah, his wife from Jethro was not Ethiopian, as far as we know, right?
It's a good question.
It actually talks very little about his wife and even less about his kids.
Yes.
Which is amazing because a lot of the Bible, or a lot of the Old Testament here is about inheritance and all that kind of thing. And it's like, it's him. And yeah, he had family. I don't know if that's a good characterization, but.
Well, I've always, now that you mention it, I've always found it problematic because in our walk, I think it is best to walk out our faith with our family. That is the best witness. Yet in the case of Moses, which is recorded as the greatest prophet, it almost completely ignores his family.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. It's like, I don't think you can say that you have to have family to walk with God. I mean, Paul is definitely,
that's not what I'm saying.
But if you do have a family, you would think that they would be featured front and center with you, basically.
Ideally.
Well, in any case, I didn't bring that up. That wasn't the revolution. Whether it was another woman he married or if it actually refers to the daughter of Jethro. What I actually want to jump into is this part of where Miriam and Aaron, they spake against Moses. And they say, he says, hath the Lord indeed spoken only to Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. So they were, I don't know, feeling uppity, feeling like they should be more in charge, perhaps, or not getting their accolades.
Yeah. It reeks a little bit of the Korah rebellion that comes much later in the timeline. But what do you mean that you're the only one that hears from God?
Yeah.
And in this instance, God personally set it straight.
Yeah. He does. So the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud, and this is verse 5, and stood in the door and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. Verse 6, I mean. This is in chapter 12, by the way, if I didn't mention that before. He said, if there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision and will speak unto him in a dream. But my servant Moses, it is not so, who is faithful in mine house. With him I will speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. So, this actually tells us a lot, by the way, right? Because Moses is almost unique in the Bible. Well, there's certainly Christ, of course, but, Moses of the prophets, in that God speaks to him directly, word for word, like face to face.
Yeah.
Plainly.
Yeah. No room for confusion.
Yeah.
And in this instance, he's also doing that with both Aaron and Miriam.
That's a good point.
But not in a way that I think that they probably appreciated.
No.
This is a situation where he's speaking very plainly with Aaron and Miriam, and I would imagine that they were trembling on the spot.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Yes.
And you have a consequence for this too, and this is one of the reasons why I bring this up, is that, the anger of the Lord is verse 9, the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed, and the cloud departed from up the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. So then the result is Moses cries out to God to heal her, and God says, well, put her outside of the camp like you do with a leprous person. Do it for 7 days, and then, boy, I keep hitting this. And then, then she'll be healed. But why was it just Miriam? Like, I mean, that's unfair. It's Aaron and Miriam are both, you know, going, hey, God talks to us too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God makes it clear. And then Miriam is the one being left, and Aaron's, it's like with the golden calf. He's the golden boy. He skates past everything. What's going on here?
Well, the anointing is on his head.
Yeah.
And I think if the Torah makes it plain that even the high priest is subject to Torah regulations.
Absolutely, yeah.
And punishment accordingly. But this really wasn't a regulation. It was a bit of a jealousy, possibly. And God set it straight, but he couldn't do the same thing to Aaron that he did to Miriam, or you wouldn't have a high priest for the next 7 days.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't go into
problematic.
Yeah,
because there is Torah that says, like, none of the priests they cannot go into the tabernacle if they have any blemish at all,
right.
Much less leprosy.
Yeah. I don't know that answers the whole question.
No.
Because it does seem a bit confusing. How is it that Aaron just gets by with a...
Right, he goes, just like the golden calf, I just poured the gold into the fire and out popped the calf. You know, if you remember from that incident. So this is not a punishment, is what you're saying. This is not a punishment for a law being broken. It's a sign.
Yeah.
Reinforcing what God just told them.
Yeah. It's a little bit of divine intervention of God using that shepherd's staff. It's how I'm visualizing it. Of this is my anointed here, Moses. I deal with him special.
Yeah.
And at the moment I'm dealing with you special, so you understand that. And I wish I had a better explanation of why Miriam received the leprosy and Aaron didn't. But if that was...
Yes, it did kind of get a walloping. I think one thing, too, it says earlier in this Torah portion, the Levites are dedicated unto God so that, and this is my paraphrase here, so that the people of Israel, the children of Israel, can interface with God in the tabernacle in a way that won't get them killed.
Right.
There's momentous power there. And, well, you can take it two different ways. And one is that you can say, okay, well, there's a God that, you know, if you don't get everything exactly right, he's going to smite you, which doesn't match the God that we see in the across the Bible, by the way. The other thing is that you can say there's tremendous power here. And if you mishandle things, you might get zapped. So it's like, you know, you have one of those power stations you drive by and stuff like that. It's got the big sign on it that has a little lightning bolt and like, you know, this is dangerous and all that. It's like, yeah, if you go up and touch the transformer, you're going to get fried. And that's not a judgment for touching the transformer. That's a consequence of the fact that you touched something that had a tremendous amount of power and you know, electricity went through you.
Right.
Anyway. So.
I want to talk about something that we can apply right now here today.
Okay, that's good.
In chapter 11.
All right.
And I think it's a lesson in human behavior.
Okay.
Chapter 11 starts out that the people begin complaining about their hardships. And God heard it and got kind of angry. And the fire broke out from God against them. But there's something key here. It says, so that the fire from Adonai broke out against them and consumed the outskirts of the camp. All right. Are we too... It doesn't really clarify. Was it just the people on the outskirts that were doing the complaining, or was everybody? But it says that the fire came out from God and consumed the outskirts of the camp.
Is there a back of the class thing?
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
Who's on the outskirts?
Right.
Those that, okay, I showed up, but I'm not really going to be part of this.
Yeah.
I'm just here because I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And they're kind of hanging back. And I promise you, I do not have any individuals in mind when I say this. This is a cumulative through many years' experience in religious organizations. But maybe during the service, you decide to hang out in the hallway and chat with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You sit in the back and play cards on this chair between you and your buddy. And, okay, I'll confess that was me once upon a time.
You did have somebody in mind.
Well, that was, oh my God, that was almost 40 years ago. But the fire consumed those on the outskirts that weren't involved, is how I'm picturing this. And then it continues on with, folks didn't get the idea. They kept grumbling. Hey, we had fish to eat in Egypt. Cost us nothing. Cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. Come on, give us some meat to eat. We're tired of this man.
Yeah.
Manna. Well, before we continue on, let's think about the man for just a minute. The manna. Where was it?
I was out in the ground, right? I mean, when you had to collect it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was out on the ground.
Out on the ground, all around the camp, right?
Yeah.
And when did you collect it?
In the morning?
Mm-hmm. Before
the dew melts.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so early in the morning, you gathered all around the camp. Keep that in mind. It's important. So they're grumbling. They want meat to eat. And verse 19, but I'm having a hard time. Start in verse 18. Tell the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you will eat meat, because you cried in the ears of Adonai. If only we had meat to eat. We had all the good life in Egypt. Okay, so God's given them what they're asking for.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Adonai is going to give you meat, and you will eat it. You won't just eat it 1 day or 2 days or 5 or 10 or 20 days, but a whole month. All right, God's going to pour out his blessings on us until it comes out your nose and you hate it. Because you have rejected Adonai, who is here with you, and distressed him with your crying and asking, why did we ever leave Egypt?
Yeah.
Paul talked about being content in all things. This is a real good life application of being content in all things. And Moses couldn't understand it. Hey, I'm here with 600,000 men plus the whole families, and you're saying we're going to have meat for a whole month. I don't understand it. And God said, hey, has my arm grown short? You'll see whether or not this is going to happen. And then we go into the elders, which that's a real good story, but we're going to run out of time.
Skip over that for the
moment. Get into
that.
Okay. Verse 30. Moses and the leaders of Israel went back into the camp, and Adonai sent a wind which brought quail from across the sea and let them fall near the camp, about a day's trip away on each side of the camp all around it, covering to the ground to a depth of 3 feet. The people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day gathering the quail. But while they gathered plenty.
Yeah.
But while the meat was still in their mouth, before they chewed it up, the anger of Adonai flared up against the people, and Adonai struck the people with a terrible plague. Therefore the place was named Kivarot HaTa'ava, graves of greed, because they buried the people who were so greedy. God provided quail once as a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
This time, it's obvious that it was a curse. But the quail was a day's journey from the camp. You're in the camp. The quail is all around the camp. How do you get to the quail?
You got to march?
What are you marching past?
So you think the manna was out still?
Absolutely.
Really?
They trampled the manna getting to the quail. They trampled the manna underfoot. What was the manna?
It's God's provision.
God's provision, God's blessing.
Yeah.
How many times in life I get emotional every time I share this. How many times in life do we trample God's blessings because we don't appreciate them, to go after the greed of our flesh? They were so greedy for this thing that they desired that they trampled over the blessings to get to it. And in our lives today, how many times do we trample over family, friends, the blessings that God has put in front of us, to go get the greed of our flesh? And you know what? God will let us go get it.
Mm-hmm.
When we have it, I think of the old country song, "You're a Winner." If you haven't heard it, yeah,
I haven't.
Old guy sitting at the bar, and young kid comes up and wants to challenge him to a fight, and he says, "Yeah, well, go ahead, you're a winner." And the song goes on of how I'm done fighting. You're a winner. Go on about your business. And sometimes when we go after our greeds, yeah, we'll get them. But what does it do to us? Do we even recognize what we did in achieving that? And this has been a real powerful lesson in my life, and it's something that has caused me to pause and review since the first time I saw it. Because the world around us skews our measuring stick, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to want to measure success the same way the world does. I don't think God's measuring stick is the same as the world's.
Mm-mm.
And I don't think ours should be either.
It's like, how do you prevent becoming that guy that wants, first of all, that ends up complaining in the face of the blessings that he receives, and second of all, that then goes rushing off for the quail and tramples the manna?
That's a really good question. I think one of the ways that we do that is we recognize our blessings on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We concentrate on our prayer time of being that of thanking God for what he has done.
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Absolutely. And we concentrate on the fact that God's not blind. If we're struggling, he knows that. And if we need out of that struggle, he knows that too.
Yeah.
And we submit to his will. Easier said than done many times.
Mm-hmm. But gratitude is it puts you in a different frame of mind.
Yes.
Like it's actually key in if you are wanting to push back anxiety, if you're anxious, depressed, there's other negative emotions too that it works with. But if you practice gratitude, there's one thing that they recommend sometimes you do. It's called gratitude journaling, where every day you have a journal and you write in 3 things that you are grateful for, like sincerely grateful for that day. It will literally change your attitude. It will open up, like anxiety falls away. Opportunities seem to open up around you, because at this point you are focusing on the good and not on the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And our minds naturally want to focus on the bad. But when you raise the good, then you start to see the good. And the more you do it, by the way, it's painful to do. Like when you first start doing it, I've done it a little bit, very little, but I've done it a little bit. And it's like you sit there and go, oh, well, what am I grateful for this time? Especially, after you've done it for a week. And you're like, well, now I've run out. No, you haven't.
And if you are the typical person, you will do this when you're at one of the lowest times of your life, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to be grateful for anything when you feel like you're on your hands and knees in the gutter.
Yeah.
But
Even if you start with, I'm alive.
yeah, I remember my time on the road. I made really good money, and then the freight changed, fuel prices went up, and I wasn't making very good money, and I was struggling to keep the 2 ends of the rope tied together in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally gave up and said, you know what? I can't do this. And I turned it over to God, and I said, you're going to run this truck. My numbers went down. What I kept went up. My peace went way up.
Oh, wow.
My stress went way down. And I would look at the numbers and shrug my shoulders and say, wow, imagine that. God's better at this than I am. But I think of a conversation I had with one of my children recently. We were talking about, do you want to tackle a Goliath?
Mm-hmm.
And many times our challenges seem to be Goliath-sized to us. Well, David quoted that God has delivered me from the lion and the bear. He'll deliver me from this Philistine as well. So my answer was, is you want to tackle a Goliath? Go find a lion and a bear and work with that.
Mm-hmm.
My son said, no. Go tend the sheep.
Mm.
Because it was while he was tending the sheep that God delivered him from the lion and the bear. And I went, wow.
Yeah.
That was profound.
Yeah.
Do we accept the service that God gives us and be grateful that he is training us for the servants that he would have us to be? And are we grateful for that training? Or are we grumbling about, oh man, if I wasn't doing this, I could have my business open on the busiest day of the week.
Mm.
How am I going to feed the family like this?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it may sound facetious, but business owners that also are Sabbath keepers have to make that decision.
That's a tough one.
And I know many of my friends over the years that have their businesses were so close to failure that they succumbed to that pressure.
Yeah.
And hired their Sabbath goys to keep their business open. And I'm sitting back watching, just crying inside, going, how do I help this?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. But we have to have that environment of appreciation so we don't get there.
Yeah. Well, that's key. I think we'll wrap it up there. So, folks out there, like the old song says, count your blessings, count them one by one. Be grateful to God for the things that he's given you and the tasks that he's put before you. Don't despise them because they are your greatest blessings. God bless you. See you next week.
Baruch Hashem.